Good morning. Happy Thursday. I hope this message finds you well. And I hope if you are in the northern states enduring the winter storm that you are faring well. I know it's a little relentless this week. But anyway, I'd like to talk about letting God be God. This is kind of our part 2, and I kind of thought this was going to be a wrap-up, but that's not the way God has been leading. Last night I sat down to continue this and wanted to make the video, but I wanted to cover so many things, and I just felt like God just put the brakes on. Like, you know what, let's study this out a little more, and let's get the full richness of this story. And you know, I encourage you to get into Joshua, and we're going to talk about the walls of Jericho, and it starts in chapter 6, but to do the history of it as well, we're going to start in chapter 6, and we're just going to kind of start there, and we're going to see some lessons that we can learn from Joshua. Now Jericho was shut up inside and outside because of the people of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand, and with its king and mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all the men of war going around the city once. Thus you shall do for 6 days. 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram horns before the ark. On the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. And when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up everywhere, straight before him." And this is verse 6 just struck me. "So Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram horn before the ark of the Lord. And he said to the people, Go forward and march around the city, and let the armed men pass before the ark of the Lord." You know, there's no hesitation there. Joshua was just like obedient, like, now, okay, this is what God said, this is what we need to do. And I wish I had that faith. I wish I had that, that resolve to do exactly what God, and that's what I'm working towards, to let God be God. You know what? God says to do this. I'm not gonna, give him excuses why this will never work. Joshua was a military leader. He understood battle, and he understood what would work and what wouldn't work. But he also knew his God, and he knew that when God said to do something, that I better do it, because you know what? He had witnessed some pretty awesome things. He was basically Moses' protege. Moses was his mentor, and he learned right alongside of him, and then God put him in charge of the Israelites, or to lead the Israelites after Moses died. And I was thinking, I did a little research on the wall of Jericho. Okay, so how impressive was this? Well, Jericho was actually built on an embankment, and there was a retaining wall. The retaining wall itself was 12 to 15 foot high, best they figure. And then on top of the retaining wall was another 6 foot thick wall, and that was 20 to 26 foot high. And then the top of the embankment was another wall, and with a mighty base. And then it was, so basically the top of that wall, which I don't have the actual figures of the third wall, but that top of that wall ended up being 46 foot above the level where the Israelites were marching around. And I'm thinking, wow, that is really impressive. Not only are there 3 walls to take down, but they're going to take down, it's going to be 46 foot high. And it noted in some of the in answers in Genesis that this was something that, the people aren't going to climb over this wall. They're not going to conquer this wall. It's something very daunting. And to see Joshua and his faithfulness and how awesome that was. And then if you look in verse 20, it says, "So the people shouted, and the trumpets were blown. As soon as the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted the great shout, the wall fell flat, so that the people went into the city, every man straight before him, and they captured the city." So they did just as God had instructed, and God was faithful, and he flattened all the walls. So how impressive is that? So I was thinking about, Joshua, how did he have such faith? How can I have such faith? And I was looking, to see, well, was he part of the parting of the Red Sea? Because that was pretty impressive, something you probably wouldn't forget, right? So I looked in Joshua 4:23. It says, "For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over it, as the Lord your God did the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over it." So he had experienced the parting of the Red Sea. He had also been the leader of the army when they were conquering the Amalekites, because the Amalekites were coming against them. And then that was the miracle when Moses was raising his hands, that the Israelites would prevail, Joshua's army. And then when his hands lowered, then they would be being defeated, and that's when he had to have help holding his arms up. But so he was present for that. And then I just read about the Red Sea, but also that was the parting of the Jordan River. But note here, in Exodus 17:18, this is after, 17:14, this is after they defeated the Amalekites. It said, "Then the Lord said to Moses, write this on a scroll as something to be remembered, and make sure that Joshua hears it, because I will completely blot out the memory of the Amalekites from under heaven." And I just think, God wants us to remember these things. It's so important to look back and to see his faithfulness. And how about when they crossed the Jordan? Joshua had them. It says, "And Joshua said to them, Take up each of you a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of tribes in the people of Israel, that this might be a sign among you. When your children ask in times to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. And when it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off, so that these stones shall be to all people in Israel a memorial forever." And I just think he remembered the faithfulness of God, and he made sure that, as Moses did, to make something set in stone. Like Moses wrote it down, and he made stones set up so when your kids see this, they can see the faithfulness of God. And I just think we could learn so much from Joshua. When God calls us to do something, to just step forward in faith, knowing, what, God is God. His ways are way beyond mine. His thoughts are way beyond mine. And that's how I want to live, just like Joshua. And there's so much more to his story. And actually, Gaylord E-Free Church is doing a series on this. Pastor Scott is, and you can catch that on TV if you don't go to that church. But I just thought it was cool that it tied in at the same time I was doing this. But, to remember God's faithfulness and to remember how awesome he is, and to step out in faith, and to not, when God tells us to do something, think of, like, you remember Peter when he was fishing and God said, "Go out and cast your net." He's like, "We've been fishing all night. We've got nothing." But he kind of like, "Okay, I'll humor you." And then he pulled up his nets and they were just overloaded with fish. I don't even want to be that. I want to be Joshua. I want to be Joshua who says, "God said to do this and I'm going to do this. I'm not going to question God. I'm not going to go talk to my friends about it. I'm not going to go, get everybody's opinion, because I know it was from God. I'm going to make sure that it was a message from God for sure." But when God tells me to do something, I want the obedience of Joshua, so I can be wowed by God, so I can let God be God in my life and not restrict him to move in my life because of my lack of obedience. And I just pray that for you today. And then if you get a chance to study more on Joshua, take the opportunity. Such a neat story. And we're going to continue next week in our series, Letting God Be God, and we'll just see what God has in store for us. You have a blessed day and keep fighting the good fight. God bless you.